Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 197, Night and Fog, directed by Alain Resnais, 1955. Now, I believe the theory was that this title there was a possibility that Hiroshima Mon Amour was going to be a double disc affair with Hiroshima Mon Amour in the first title, and then as a second disc, it would be Night and Fog would be included, since it's one of Resnais' documentaries that he made before Hiroshima Mon Amour, and was certainly the film that got him a lot of attention from the onset. But I think they decided to make it two distinct titles. And given that the documentary is only about 31 minutes and there's only a few supplements, it was actually given a lower tier price. I think the MSRP was $19.95, which typically for a one disc at the time that it came out was $29.95. Nowadays it's a little bit lower because actually the Blu-rays tend to be the more expensive ones than the DVDs. So, but at any rate, so this happened again, I believe, with Mishima Life in Four Chapters, and which was directed by Paul Schrader, was about Mishima, and it was going to be included Mishima's film Patriotism, but again, it was made into distinct titles. So, anyways, that's my little Criterion aside. As far as the film itself, what can you say about it? It was one of the first. It was one of the first attempts cinematically to talk about the Holocaust. When it came out, it was 10 years after the end of World War II and the liberation of many of the camps, including Auschwitz, and the various war crime tribunals, the big one being in Nuremberg. There were several other ones in Poland as well, had come and gone. And so it was something that was still kind of fresh in people's minds. And then there would be another resurgence, as it were, particularly in Europe, with the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials, starting in '63 and ending in '65. And again, the subject comes on again. What can I say about the Holocaust that has already been said? I mean, I don't think I need to go into what it was and what it means. So, but I do want to talk about the film, and actually that's actually quite appropriate, because the point of this is that it's not so much a documentary. If anything, it's a poetic reflection on something that happened, and actually this would give a lot of indications of how Resnais would work as a director, what his approach would be, and how he would go about things, and this would be very, very consistent throughout his career. In addition to the themes that he and the consistent themes that he would explore through his filmography. For instance, when he was approached to make such a documentary, he was very, very hesitant of doing it, and mostly because he wasn't there, and he didn't want to presume to say anything that isn't true or isn't genuine. So he wanted to have someone who actually went through all of that and survived it all. And Jean Carroll was hired to write the script, which ended up being voiceover narration. He survived Mauthausen-Gusten concentration camp, and he actually had written poems afterwards. It was Poésie de la Nuit en brouillard, Poems in Night and Fog, and that's actually where the title comes from. And so he was hired to write it, and the way he approached it, which I think actually is quite befitting, is that while he mentioned specific things that you would find, and which can be stated as objective facts, he would sometimes undercut it by saying, by having words like words are insufficient, or talking about that the memory is a bit murky and faded, and so it leaves you more with an impression rather than it's not didactic in any way at all, and this is part of, and actually this is why it's still, even almost, it would be almost 60 years after this came out, it's still very powerful and very moving, because it doesn't try to, well, first off, it doesn't try to presume anything. It's not didactic, and it's not overtly emotional. It's not, you don't get the sense of intense rage. Everything, there's a subdued quality, but you can tell that something is there, and actually in a way I like it how the emotion is played down, because for starters I think the emotion is already there. You don't need to overemphasize it or over amplify the emotion. If you're someone that believes in the value of human life, you're already going to find this enraging anyways, to see what happened to the millions upon millions of people. This dehumanization, and that's one of many things that's objective about it, and about what had happened. So there is a poetic quality in the presentation, and this is and the construct of it. It was a combination of stock footage and also filming of photographs in various archives, and contemporary footage that actually was shot in 1955, and it was the camps of today. And this, to me, is the thing that always strikes me about the Holocaust, and particularly whenever there are contemporaneous shots of, say, of Auschwitz or any of those places where any of those things happened, is seeing the ruins, more or less, or seeing these buildings that are, some of them, many of them were burned down, and particularly in Eastern Europe, as the Soviets were coming closer, and they all had to flee, abandon ship, as it were, and so most of the camp, like most of Auschwitz, was destroyed, but there's still some remnants of it that still remain. But to see these in the midst of grass and trees and I forget the river that flows by the camp, or is near the camp, but it's like nature continues on. And actually, the first time that I saw this juxtaposition was another documentary about the Holocaust that came 30 years after Night and Fog, and that was Shoah by Claude Lanzmann. And I didn't see the full 9 hours. I only saw bits of it. That's another title, by the way, Criterion. Get on it if you haven't already. But anyways, and there was a moment in Shoah where someone was describing, I think, how the bodies after they were gassed, how they were disposed of in this sort of large pit. This was one of the attempts to try to burn a lot of bodies very quickly. And as he's talking, as he's recollecting this moment, there's a camera. It's very low to the ground, so it was almost as if somebody's just holding it like this, and just traveling along on the ground. So it's very low onto the ground, and you see grass and I think there's a tree stump that shows up and some rocks, and basically it's just a natural setting. and that really, really made an impression on me. And I find that juxtaposition very, very powerful in regards to the Holocaust, because what that says is that with this moment where these awful things have happened, afterwards nature goes on, and you can take it in one or two ways. You can take it that nature is indifferent to the ways of man. In other words, it's not going to stop them from, it's not like the places are going to be any less horrific. It's not unlike in Greek myths, like particularly with the death of Orpheus, where remnants of his body were there, and supposedly that this is supposed to be the place where the birds sing more sweetly because Orpheus was there. But this idea that the works of man will somehow affect the course of nature, is a false idea. That nature is going to continue on, and you can take that either as nature is indifferent to the works of man, that it's not going to, it's not going to be any different, which you can take that slightly in a negative way, or I guess I personally can't take it in a negative way, but I'm sure you can. You can take it more cynically, or you can say that life does go on, that ultimately life prevails, even in the midst of horrific death. And certainly for me, where I, for me and my faith, the most important feast of the year is Pascha, and it's the celebration of Christ's resurrection, and as a testament to his victory over death and of sin. And so in that way, it's reassuring to see nature still there. So you can take it in one or two ways. Either that nature is indifferent to what goes on, or that nature can overcome the horrors that we can do to ourselves. So yeah, this is heavy subject matter. So you can understand why. Anyways, so everything about it has a poetic quality to it, and it's all done in 31 minutes, and this is in contrast to Klaus Lanzmann, who did it in 9 hours. But I mean, it's not to say that one is better than the other, and both had their particular constructions and their particular circumstances, and certain people were involved, and certain sentiments or certain aesthetics were involved, and and that's the result. So I think of them as comparable, and again, apples and oranges, in the end. So it's not that one is better than the other. So yeah, it is one of those. I mean, it's one of those films that I just saw it because it's not one of those titles that you just go up and say, hey, I want to watch Night and Fog. I did think of it as something that you could if you are going to see. I think there are some films. Actually, I know this. There are films that I do keep as like a once a year viewing, and I think I put Night and Fog as one for the Holocaust. Either January 31, which is the most common day of commemoration. That's when Auschwitz was liberated, or as close to April 19th as possible, and that's actually what the United States, Israel, and Poland use as commemorating the Holocaust, and that's the start of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Actually, I have a couple of other films that are related to the Holocaust that also fit as well. I have a documentary about the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials. I have another documentary about Auschwitz, and then, of course, I have Schindler's List. And so, so yeah, I guess Night Fog, I guess if I want the quick and dirty version, just 31 minutes, you know, that's a good one to see. But I think what's interesting, I mean, it's interesting seeing it now because, I mean, again, this was made in 1955, and this is when everything was still fresh, and now it's very easy to find images and videos and such in regards to the Holocaust, and there's a lot of information out there, and a lot has been said about the Holocaust. And I think what makes it so powerful is that it's still moving. You would think that it would feel diluted. You would think that we would be desensitized by seeing if you've seen enough of images in the Holocaust and or anything else related to the Holocaust, that you would be desensitized to it, but there's still something quite moving about it. And I don't feel like it's trying to push buttons or make any kind of provocations or trying to stir up emotions. I think really it was really just kind of coming to grips with something that happened, and it's more reflections than anything. But I also don't want to make it sound like it's trying to dilute it that way. It's really, you know what? In the end, it's indescribable. It's really, really hard to pin down exactly what it is. I mean, you can talk about certain sensations. I mean, right now, I think there is this growing unease, and I think it's just because of when you add up all the little anecdotes and all the things that happened in those 12 years, it's really awful. And if you have this, if you believe, if one of your fundamental beliefs is the sanctity and sacredness of life, and especially of human life, or including human life, to see that kind of inhumanity play out is really unnerving. And what makes it more unnerving and unsettling is that it was allowed to happen. That it wasn't just the fact that it was brutish and it was horrendous, but that it was justified. The inhumanity was justified, and it was this ever-pervading attitude that a particular, because of a set of parameters which are in the end quite arbitrary, because you satisfy certain conditions, again very arbitrary, you are no longer considered a human being. You're not worthy to be called a human being. And because of this, we feel justified to do anything that we want. And furthermore, it's not just that we don't think of you as a human being. We think of you as a pest. We think of you as vermin, as a plague. And what do we do with vermin, pest, and plague? We kill them off. And that is the horror of it. And that is really what should be remembered. It's not the statistics, it's not the procedures, it's not the sequence of events that went from Hitler being declared Chancellor of the Weimar Republic all the way to VE Day. It's none of those things. It's the heart of what should be at the heart of remembering the Holocaust is that there was a time when it was accepted that a number of human beings aren't viewed as human beings and aren't treated as human beings. In fact, and they're treated no differently than a rat with an infestation or insects with infestations. And we kill them in the same way that we exterminate bugs that infest our houses. So that's what you get out of it. And in that sense, Night and Fog does that very well. And in a way, I think that's all it needs to say. Of course, it's going to say other things, and it's certainly a reflection of the filmmakers, of what they were interested in. But certainly, you can get that from Night and Fog, and the best Holocaust works, I think, should do that. And yeah, that's, what more can one say? It's indescribable. So yeah, Night and Fog. And until next time, take care.